Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Crystal, and this is Books Forever After, where I sit on the floor and we talk about everything and all things books. So today we talk about my favorite romance tropes, specifically for historical romance, and that is kind of, for historical romance, that was like my first love. So these kind of tropes also kind of feed into other genres of romance that I have eventually been introduced to, so contemporary romance and fantasy romance. So yeah, I will try to think of a couple of examples of my favorite books within these tropes, but really what's so great and what's great about Booktube is I am looking for all the recommendations that you can give me to read. Especially for my very first one. So Second Chance. Second Chance is my absolute, like, one of the absolute favorite, at least top three. I guess I'm overcomplicating it now. But Second Chance is just, it just hits somewhere. And I just love Second Chance romance. Anytime I get it, whether they had a falling out and they come back years later, you know, things didn't work out or some, you know, wrong time or whatever, and they fall back in love, had a bad experience, and then 2 years later, you know, whatever it could be, whatever sort of conflict arose, that they came back. The one that really comes to mind is like one of my favorite all-time books, especially before Booktube, and I will link that video that I did. I did a kind of like a series of my favorite books, romance books before Booktube, and I believe the first one I did was historical romance, so I will link that down below, and possibly in the cards. So yeah, favorite historical romance, and that has to be Again the Magic by Lisa Kleypas. So good. I have reread this book probably 3-4 times. I don't know how many times over the years. So such a great romance. It's pretty well known in the Booktube community. This follows McKenna, and I think her name is Aline. They were kind of like childhood sweethearts, you know, and teenagers or whatever. He was the stable boy, and she's the daughter of the Earl. Obviously, forbidden aspect there. When she's 18 and they're around 18 or so, her father finds out, and he's not a very nice man, that they have some sort of sweetheart romance coming because they were friends. You know, it's like also a friends to lovers kind of aspect as well. And he threatens that if she doesn't end it with end the relationship with him and force him to leave, that he will unalive him, or find a way to unalive him or send him off into like having a horrible life. Obviously, what ends up happening is she ends up telling him she doesn't love him and breaks his heart, and kind of to push him away so that he leaves the estate. McKenna goes off into America, and he becomes a self-made man, and he comes back years later when her brother, who's now the Earl, invites him, and is actually is complete opposite of his father and advocates for Americans to come over and all basically the innovation industry. So I think this one is particular. He has interesting in investing in McKenna's like ship business or something like that, or I want to say supply chain kind of business with ships and such like that. So, or it might have been a train. I can't remember. Anyway, and then he comes back, and he, you know, to seek revenge with against Aline, and Aline had kind of is holding a secret and doesn't was involved in an accident that involved her legs being injured in some sort of fashion, and he's just coming back to seek revenge, and he wants to make her fall in love with him and break her heart, kind of like quid pro quo to her. And of course, there's a lot of pining, and my gosh, it's just so much tension and romance and just pining. I love the pining, and then it's just so good. Absolute favorite. And so So the next one, within Second Chance, I really love when there's like a marriage in trouble or a marriage in crisis within the Second Chance trope. It's another thing that just really hits different. It's also because they're all already an established couple, and it really just shows the interactions with that couple having to move through that and find their ways back to each other. So there's pining, there's angst. It's a very emotional aspect part of it, and that's why I love about romance as well, is the different kinds of relationships. And why I love Second Chance is because you have to work through those problems and talk through those out and overcome them. So it can just be so swoony and sweetly romantic. I just love that. One that I just recently read was by Sarah McLean, which I loved, which is The Day of the Duchess. Love that. This is part of a series. I can't remember the exact name of the series, but she is the sister from the first book in that novel, where the sister, who was a hero in that first one, actually pushes the hero in this one into the pond, and she is ostracized, made fun of. When the sister catches him in some sort of like gazebo or orangery or thing at some like garden party. And at the time, the heroine was pregnant with their child. There's a lot of deep emotions in this one. The hero comes back after a 2-year separation, because the heroine has left, and he's actually been kind of like, she ran away, and he has been searching for her for those 2 years as well. What is interesting is that in the beginning of this book, she is at the parliament and is requesting a divorce from her husband, which is a big whole thing. And he tells her afterwards, after that whole introduction, I will divorce you if you find me your replacement. And so majority of this book kind of takes over at a house party that she does with a bunch of eligible ladies that she has recommended. Her sisters also tag along, so that was also great. But he has no intention of marrying anyone else. He actually it was just kind of a ruse to get her back. Such a great one in here. There is a grovel in here, and they really talk about the situations that had happened. I loved the sisterly bond in this book that it kind of conveys when the sisters come to the heroine's side to help her through at the house party and things like that, and be her like moral support and everything. So such a great book. There is some trigger warnings here as well, so I would recommend you checking that one out. Next is kind of like, I know these are like kind of like sub-genres, but let me go to the next one. So Marriage of Convenience. Obviously, I love A Marriage of Convenience. It feels kind of similar to Within Second Chance, or like very similar to A Marriage in Trouble, is because most of the time throughout the book the couple is married, so they have to work through that as a married couple as well. So I can't think of one right now as a recommendation, but I just love that trope, and anytime I can get that in the historical romance as well, it's just really great. Truly most, to be honest, it's kind of hard to pinpoint one exactly, because majority of historical romances do kind of have that trope as the leading trope, because within that time period, women had to marry or else be ruined. So that's why it's such a common trope in historical romance. Another one that I like is like Lessons in Seduction, and piggybacking off of like a Lessons in Seduction kind of aspect. I want to say The Lady Gets Lucky is a very similar one that I just read recently by Joanna Shoup, which is like a Lessons in Seduction, I believe. And what kind of piggies off of that trope is that aspect or that vibe is like a masked ball or like a stranger to lover kind of a thing. So mysterious stranger to lover. So I love when we have ballrooms. So we have and especially like a masked ball, and it kind of gives that like feeling of Cinderella-esque kind of feeling. And then discovering that, oh, they actually kind of they fall in love and that kind of thing. So it kind of just puts really initially it focuses on their initial attraction, their chemistry, and it builds off of that, and that tension, that mysteriousness, and it's just so wickedly good and just like a guilty pleasure. I just love that. So the most recent one I read, there's a lot of Joanne's Troop, had a lot of these tropes, was The Bride Goes Rogue, and that one has that, and that's like my favorite one of that series, because that one has that aspect. It's kind of like, I forget what it's called, like a Pall ball. It's like a French ball where basically anything kind of goes. It's a very like rowdy bunch. It's kind of like an orgy ball. Everybody's masked, but you all kind of just have steamy fun times all the time. So yeah, so that also goes into another subgenre that I love, is like house parties, or clubs. So like brothel clubs or gaming clubs, that kind of an aspect. So yeah, anytime I can get those as well, I just love those tropes as well. And that leads to auctions and things like that. So it's just that whole kind of, it gives such a variety of different scenarios and plot that can stem from that. And then I also do like hate to love or like dislike to love, not necessarily like enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers. Enemies to lovers is more focused in fantasy romance, and I think it's also used a little bit too often to be like a generalized term when it's not really enemies to lovers. But really, like, what I mean, like mysterious stranger to lovers or to enemies or whatever you call it, but like really dislike to love. So really your basic, what I would call basic romance, two people meet, they don't know each other, or maybe their first perception was they didn't like the person that in their first what's it called, first perception, I don't know. I can't remember. Think like Pride and Prejudice, where because of their first impressions, there you go, that is kind of why it didn't work. Forced proximity. Along with that is the one bed trope, so that kind of falls within that. I love forced proximity. That's really great. Why I love house parties is they're kind of forced together over multiple times, multiple days in a row, and along, or when they're traveling and things like that, and like stuck in a carriage, and like kind of like that quest vibe that you get in a fantasy romance. The forced proximity, like a stage version, that is kind of like the quest, or like to me is like a traveling kind of thing as well, a journey. And then, so with that forced proximity, this is probably why I love governess tropes. Think Jane Eyre as the very first one. I can always think of one of my favorite classic novels. There is one also by Julia Le Guin that I had mentioned in my favorite historical romances video as well. That one, was it Julia Le Guin? Yes. It's also kind of that aspect of like a single parent or single dad that you get in a contemporary romance. So the whole governess aspect as well, usually. So there's like, so that aspect is usually common in that. Sometimes it's not always the case, but love the governess trope from that. And then really it's not really a trope, but really aspects of historical romances that I love, and this is probably why I like Julia Quinn so much, And I'm currently reading Kate Bateman, so I feel like she has this aspect as well that I can really tell from the get-go, is banter. I really enjoy a book with a lot of banter and just that giddy feeling of them like communicating, interacting, and the back and forth is really fun. Another aspect is like a found family aspect, or really just Bridgertons, they are related, so it's kind of like they can't really be found family, they are family, but that whole family kind of feeling, because it also includes the whole witty banter, because the back and forth of them ribbing each other is just really hilarious. Another kind of, okay, so those are kind of the other aspects. Some settings that I love, or like subgenres, obviously pirate romance. It also delves into the forced proximity. I love and a one-bed trope usually. Love pirate romances. Plus they're just really fun and adventurous usually, and sometimes very bodice ripper type feeling as well, and dramatic. So love those. Most recently that I read of a pirate romance is A Gentle Rogue. I also loved A Sea of Ruin by Pam. That was like the more modern author writing that one. That is a very dark one, and very angsty as well, because it's like second chance and everything in there, so it's just very angsty and dark. So yeah. Some other settings that I really like, I think I mentioned House Party, and this kind of follows like Jane Eyre. It's a Gothic, so I love Gothic romances as well, and those are typically historical romances. Although the most recent one I read was Gothic Hana, and that was like in a modern one by Runix, and she's actually going to be publishing soon, hopefully soon. We don't have a date yet, but it's going to be the prequel to Gothic Hana. I can't remember the name. I will put a picture up here, where it actually is like the historical Gothic romance. So yes, I love those settings. It's also kind of because it's a dark romance, because truly a Gothic romance is a dark romance, because of the setting and the tones, and usually there's some sort of like supernatural vibe as well, because, you know, it's an eerie kind of ghost-like feeling, you know, kind of thing. So what else do I have? So I think that's about it. Those are the ones I can think of. Those are the most like common ones that I love. Let me see here. I'm gonna double check, make sure I don't have any more of those. Oh yes, my final like favorite historical romances. Everyone knows Outlander, and I haven't read those books, but I have watched the shows. I don't think I will read the books because I watched the shows. I think it's kind of like ruined that journey for me, I think. But with that said, I love time travel books, or specifically, so like when it's a historical romance where they travel back in time. I know Johanna Lindsey has a couple of those. Jude Deveraux has one where it sets back into medieval times. My most favorite one is by Jude Deveraux that has the Remembrance, and it's not really time travel, but it kind of is. It's like a past lives romance as well, so where she is hypnotized and discovers, you know, and you follow her through her past lives. She goes through like 2 jumps actually in that. It was kind of like a little bit of Inception, because she goes back to England in like 1812, and then she goes back further than that, like medieval, and it's like she got hypnotized when she was in that time period. So it was really fun. Really loved it. Childhood friends to lovers kind of aspect, and it's fated mates, you know, soulmates kind of a thing. I also mentioned that in my favorite historical romances video as well. The only thing about that book that it's still a 5-star book for me, but it's like a very valid point if a person doesn't like this book, is because at the end it kind of feels rushed when she comes back to the future, and that was a little bit disappointing. It would have been nice with additional chapters or so to kind of wrap it up a little bit better, instead of feeling rushed. Alright, so that is it. If you have any book recommendations for me, please comment below. I would welcome any recommendations, specifically like Past Lives and Second Chance, Marriage and Trouble romances. Those are like my top 3 as well. So, and The Masked Balls. So I love those. Governess. It's just really all of these. So if you have any recommendations for me, please yeah, put them down below. And yeah, you please let me know also if you would like, what is your favorite trope when you read historical romance. And please like and subscribe if you would like, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.